I'll admit vitamin A is essential for skin, but by the time you finish watching this, retinol is gonna look like an absolute pile of shit. And I cannot believe that no one else on YouTube has ever said what I'm about to say. Understand this and you'll never waste money again. Retinol is a form of vitamin A that gets converted into different vitamin A derivatives in the skin, which then in turn get converted into retinoic acid. Now, retinoic acid then acts on retinoic acid receptors, which were discovered in 1988 or so in the nucleus of the skin cells next to the DNA, to then turn on genes like HOXB1, which is the biological point of rubbing it into yourself. Pause for a second and really understand what I've just said if you want to get past all the marketing skincare companies throw at you to charge you way too much money for way too little in return. Retinol is just a method of activating retinoic acid receptors. On a molecular level, activating this specific receptor is ultimately what gives you the skin you dream of. If you want the best skin you've ever had, understand what retinoic acid receptors are. Why the f haven't more people on YouTube spoken about this already? In other words, receptors that activate certain genes because of retinoic acid, which is the final thing that retinol is converted into once you use it. So therefore, if you use things on your skin which don't need to be converted, like retinol, and instead can naturally interact straight away with these receptors with no time-consuming conversion processes needed, you're going to notice much quicker improvements in your appearance, and that is what I'm about to show you. There's 3 types of RARs, alpha, beta, and gamma, and the most abundant one in the skin is gamma. So that's the only reason you're looking in the mirror, rubbing things like retinol into your face to activate this holy grail called RAR gamma. So to know for sure if your skincare is amazing or shit, you can ignore Reddit, you can completely f off dumbass journalists that think they're doctors because they wrote a crap article, and you can definitely slap people in the face that have no idea how retinol actually works, but still make a video about the top 5 retinols to buy. And you can do all that because when you're shopping, this is the only vitamin A question you'll ever need to ask. How good is it at activating RAR gamma? And here are some skincare products now that do it best and that skincare companies don't want you to know about. Tretinoin, adapalene, tazarotene, and trifarotene. These are all prescription only though, so you do need someone like myself with the link in the description below to give you a digital prescription wherever you are in the world so you can go and buy it. Tretinoin is probably the most common one that's used at the minute because it's just so widely available. It's also been around the longest. Adapalene is probably the second most widely available and been around the second longest, and it's also pretty good. Tazarotene is even newer than those two and is relatively similar to adapalene in its efficacy according to a study in 2008, but it was also found to be slightly less tolerable, so it's not one that I generally start to recommend to my patients. Trifarotene is the newest one out of all of them. A study in 2020 showed that it actually had 20 times more affinity for RAR gamma than alpha or beta. And the same study also found that it created more gene expression compared to tazarotene too. In fact, it's so strong that I think you can only buy it in a 0.005% concentration under the brand name Athlete. Do I recommend it? For the vast majority of my patients, not really, to be honest, because there's less comparative studies on it right now, and as strong as it may be, you're still going to get incredibly good skin, in fact probably the best skin you've ever had, even using something like tretinoin.